So my name is Colm Carew. I finished first place in the Irish Remote Duel Locals playing Virtual World. So it was 5 rounds, went pretty well. I picked Virtual World because overall I think it's a cheap meta option. And I've played decks like Invoked to death at this point. So I think overall Virtual World is a good play, mainly because it's a combo deck. Then you can rely heavily on Chuche for the likes of like outing Mystic Mine and then popping like Eldritch spells, stuff like that, Eldritch traps. So I can just step through the ratios of what I run. It's fairly standard. So we have 3 Virtual World Lulu, 3 Lolo, 3 Lili, 3 GG, and 3 Nyan. So the deck overall is really good so long as you draw one of these 4. If you draw a Nyan, which I have often drawn 2 Nyan and no Virtual World Engine, you can kind of be in a very hard spot. So that's why I kind of side, I'll show later, is like Twin Twisters, because often I have like Twin Twisters, pitch Nyan, summon Nyan, revive Nyan back. And when he revives, he's a tuner. So then you have the option to either synchro summon then into like Charge Warrior to try and get a draw, or make something like Jaja to banish something then into Zeus. So he's a very good extender, but from like a play starter, he is very lacking. So that's all the monsters. There is a new Virtual World out in Blazing Vortex, Virtual World 2-2. So she is similar to Nyan, but I don't think she'll either be played or she'll be played at 1, so I'll have to decide whether or not I'll be changing after that. So that is all of the Virtual World monsters. So then just on to the Virtual World spells. So you're on 3 City, 3 Qinglong, and 3 Chuche. So City gets you one of these out from the deck. It can be ashed because it has other effects as well, based on the number of gates you have. So if you have 3 gates on field, you mill 3 cards from the top of your deck. So that's why it can be ashed, because that's done on resolution. So what's really important to know about City is if you're going into a board that has something like Mechaba or Totally Awesome, you just activate your City and then you'll go and get your Qinglong, because then Qinglong's effect is you can banish a Virtual World card from your graveyard, target a monster, and negate its effects until the end of the turn. So cards like Mechaba and Totally Awesome, they only negate activation, not spell or trap effects. So that came up for me in game 1. It came up, and I can go through my matchups later. But yes, City into Qinglong, I did a lot. But obviously, the main play is City into Chuche, and then have Lulu in hand, and then that's your VFD, Chuche, and Gossip Shadow play. So that is the 24 Virtual World cards. So it currently is a 24 card engine, except you then also often just play these 7 cards as well. So it's more like a 31 card engine. So E-Telly is really good. It can get you to your tuner or to your Nyan if you're missing that extra play. So there's not much to say other than that. It gets you either your Lulu or Nyan. Foolish Burial Goods is a card at the start I was like, oh, you're going -1. But it's a real consistency card. I can honestly say Foolish Burial Goods came up a lot more for me to pay off wise than Pot of Desires did. So there was one play I did which was always kind of strange, was if my opponent, say, had Mechaba on field and I had Qinglong in hand, if I didn't have City in hand, I was like, oh, I need to stop this Mechaba. I'd actually activate Qinglong, and if that went ahead, I'd activate Foolish Burial Goods. They'd usually let that go ahead. And then I used to actually send City to the grave because I just wanted to get rid of a terrible... so it is going very neg just to out Mechaba, but it's better to do that and get your cards banished. So that was one of the plays I did, which is not great. You usually send Qinglong off Foolish Burial Goods to get your ad, but often out Mechaba is very good. And then Desires. Desires is very good in this deck because often it reads banish 10 cards, draw 2, and then place one of those back, because when Nyan gets banished, you get to pick any of your banished cards, put them back to deck, whether they're face down or face up. So if they're face down, your opponent doesn't know what you've shuffled back. So that's pretty sweet. This card probably will get swapped out for Pot of Disparity in Blazing Vortex if I get hands on 3. Card is very good and really brings up Virtual World. So that's the main engine, 31 cards. Not really much is going to change between different Virtual World lists for that. So the main difference then between each build is hand traps. So I ran 3 Ash, 3 Bell, and 3 Nibiru. So Ash performed brilliantly all day. Bell performed a lot better than I expected, and Nibiru was dead every game I played all day. Because my matchups were Shadal Invoked, Unchained, Plunder Patrol, Eldritch Dogmatica, and Shadal Magistus. And I thought I'd need them against Shadal Magistus, but in general, I was always pitching Nibiru off of the Quinglong because it just never came up. And against the Eldritch Dogmatica player, the Ash and Bell were amazing because both of them can negate Nadir Servant, because Nadir Servant can also add back from grave, as well as Scarlet Sanguine. So I must say, like, Bell is the real difference you'll see here. And so that's kind of the main hand trap ratios. I would probably take out Nibiru and main Droll instead. And then alternatively, I may take out the Bell and put in Gamma, as that's kind of what a lot of people have been doing after LCS 10. So I'm going to have to do a more review on what was done there to make a decision on what I'm going to play for the extravaganza. So that is the main deck, and I'll just go off to the extra deck now. Extra deck is very standard. So for Synchros, we're playing Shen, Croc, Vermilion Dragon Mech, Xiaofeng, 2 Cloud Castles, Stardust Charge Warrior, and Juju. So I must say I did not go into Xiaofeng all day, but he is very useful if you want to add something like Cycle Reader or Ash or Bell or any tuner from deck to hand. You'll use him often to just get rid of him and go into Leo, and then bring him back with Castle and go into your VFD play. But overall, I think Vermilion Dragon Mech kind of shone, especially in my last game. So he's very threatening in that, like, he can either help you pop boards because you can pop stuff with him, then go like get rid of him, go into Cloud Castle, pop something again. Or what happened me in my final game was I popped their Strike and they changed Strike to get rid of Mech. And then when he's destroyed by a card effect, you get to add back a banished tuner. So often I'll probably usually go the route of the Vermilion Dragon Mech play to banish a tuner, pop himself, add the tuner back to hand, then Cloud Castle, revive the mech, and go into the VFD that way. So the main difference with my Synchro package as opposed to everyone else's, or a lot of other people's, is I'm not running Coral Dragon. So Coral Dragon doesn't really come up that often. Like when it does, it's fine. It's nice that you have an extra pop, but overall I opted to run an extra Exceed instead. So I'll just go into that there now. So the Exceeds I run were Zeus, 2 Calamities, the Phantom Fortress, M7, Gossip Shadow, and Jaja. So originally I wanted Jaja to be a number 49 Fortune Tune, but unfortunately I couldn't get a hold of one for the Remote Duel Locals. So I played Jaja instead, and I must say there's 2 or 3 games where he really overperformed because his effect to just banish the monster he battles with is really helpful. And then after that, making Zeus is just so impactful. So game 1 in the last match against Shadal Magistus, I did that play. I had Zeus on board, and then I had Chuche live, and opponent activated Shadal Fusion. So unfortunately, I had to wipe my board with Zeus and Chuche to pop Zeus. So their Shadal Fusion would fizzle, but that wouldn't be the game ultimately, because then they'd know their plays, and then the real advantage of Virtual World is your ability to recycle. M7 didn't really come up except in my second match. I was debarriered for Synchro, so I couldn't Synchro summon. So M7 came into it because I was against Unchained, so I was able to just throw some cards back to his hand and attack the game. And then obviously Gossip Shadow is fantastic. He really just stopped Dragoon for the day was his main purpose. Other than that, I actually didn't use him that often. Phantom Fortress never came up, but in theory is just another Dragoon out or a way of ripping cards out of your opponent's hand. And then obviously VFD, he'll just get banned eventually. card really performed. Anytime I got him off, I won. So he was very, very good. So that is the extra deck done. So move over to the side. So we have 3 Drawn and Knockbird, 3 Cycle Reader, and 3 Lancia as the hand traps to side in. So Droll was in case I ran into Drytron or Invoke Dogmatica or anything like that, but never came up. But in general, I think the Droll and Knockbird for the matches I faced would have been better than the Nibiru, as at least I could have done something with him. Cycle Reader came in when I was against the Eldritch player, but overall I wasn't too afraid of Eldritch Dogmatica. I'd be more afraid of Zoo Eldritch because of their ability to make Zeus. So yeah, Cycle Reader is essentially just DD Crow in that matchup. And then Lancia was for if I played another Virtual World matchup, which I did not. So Lancia never came in, but I would still probably keep these all in, and then again just swap the Droll for Nibiru, so there wouldn't be any big change there. So then we also have Duster, 2 Storm, and 2 Twin Twisters as the spells for side. So these are obvious enough. They're the power cards. Outing Border is the main reason to run the Storm. The reason I ran Twin Twisters instead of something like Call by the Grave in the side was that I wanted to be able to be reactive, because in playtesting with some of my friends, I got anti-spelled, and like that really hurts. You essentially just lose the game if your opponent has any board presence then. So Twin Twisters really came up to be very reactive, and especially if you're against something like Prank Kids to, in your standby phase, pop their fusion spell and they can't do anything. It's just very, very good. So we'll have to change the side then for the extravaganza, as I imagine. Like today was the Remote Duel Locals was mostly Shadal-esque matchups and Eldritch, so there wasn't anything like too crazy that Virtual World didn't have a good matchup against. And the last card is Mischief of the Gnomes. So that's really against your to play against Virtual World again. So you'd send it off Foolish. I could side Beatrice as well to have a way to search it that way. If you hard draw it as well, that would be fine. So you can either, so it has the same effect on field or in grave. So you can either banish it from grave or just activate it on field to either reduce or increase the level of all of your opponent's monsters in their hand by 1. You would probably call the reduce one. The reason being is that all the Virtual Worlds lock you into level 3 and rank 3 and higher after they're summoned. So if you let them get one off and then they chain Lulu and you change Mischief of the Gnomes, they wouldn't be able to get their Lulu out. So it's a really good side card. I don't know like if I'll keep it in, but I kind of sided heavily enough for Drytron and Virtual World matchups, and none of them kind of came. So yeah, I imagine in the future they probably will now though, and I expect to see a lot more Virtual World hate. So I can go through some of the matchups I went through. So round 1 was Shadal Invoked. Game 1, so I won the die roll. Sorry, I lost the die roll. I went second, but my opponent opened poorly. They were able to make Mechaba, and that's where I was able to get over the Mechaba by activating the Qinglong as well as that, which burial goods in order to negate the effect, and then just popped off from there. And then in game 2, I was actually in a pretty losing position, but I managed to get a lot of damage in early game. And then he activated Verte Anaconda's effect, and then Gossip Shadow, and then I won on life then in time, so that was pretty nice. Round 2 against Unchained, I just had a very good matchup against them. I was able to send their cards rather than pop them. And then obviously VFD is just a win button against a lot of decks. Plunder Patrol, so that also went 2-0. The main thing about Plunder Patrol was my opponent had to Desires twice both games, so that really cut him off with a lot of resources. So against Eldritch Dogmatica, the first game took like 30 minutes, but Ash and Bell came up so often that I ever, like, the Eldritch came out once, I think, in both games, and no cards were popped from Hakuya or Conquistador, so those cards were pretty ineffective against me. And then the final round was against Shadal Magistus. I went 2-1 here. Game 1 went on a while, but overall I think I had the more resources. And then that's just what went out there. In game 2, I opened up 3 hand traps, Twin Twisters, and a Nyan. into a window, and I think I just lost there. In general, the deck does not struggle with window, because you can just do the city play into Queen Long, banish the city, and negate the window effect and pop off from there. And then in game 3, I drew the best virtual world hand I've ever got. I got City, Queen Long, Lulu, Lau Lau, and Nyan. So I was able to make the VFD with a Chuche pop, as well as number 75, and then add Lulu back to hand at end phase. So overall, that was pretty good. So kind of two things one thing I really want to point out is that you can play around Torrential Tribute with this deck, only with 2 cards. So Lulu and Lily can play around Torrential Tribute, because Torrential Tribute is a win. And so Lulu will summon itself, then add, and then Lily will summon itself, and then send again. So in that case, these 2 guys can play around Torrential Tribute, which is pretty handy. So overall, I think Virtual World is a very strong mid-deck contender. Blazing Vortex has obviously made the deck even better again. I do know in LCS 10 it didn't do as well as the likes of Zoo Eldritch, and I think in anticipation for those matchups, I'll probably start siding the likes of Evenly Matched and maybe Book of Moon, just to kind of counteract that. But yeah, so that's pretty much the deck profile. I just want to give a shout out to Waterford Comics, Waterford Locals. That's where I play most often, and I've been playing online with them a good bit. And then as well as Cork Locals, as that's where I've been the last last year and a half. So overall, I entered this tournament to try and practice for the extravaganza, see how I got on streaming. Luckily, there was no hiccups. Everything went very well. So yeah, that's it. I'll definitely do it again. I'd recommend it to anyone who hasn't tried it out to give it a go. So that's it.